Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll discuss over Chol Hamoed the waning of the seventh day of Pesach, God willing, which is the beginning of Parsha Pesach in the book of Shmos, chapter 13, verse 17. We're used to this pasuk, and probably many of us have preconceived notions of what this pasuk means, which are correct, but just interesting to try and take a fresh look at the pasuk. Vayihi b'shalach Paro es ha'am, and it was when Paro sent out the nation. I want to make sure we're all on the same page. The Jewish people have been sent out already. They've gone. We read about it, actually. We discussed it last week. The Jewish people have been sent out. So after Paro sent out the nation, and God did not lead the Jewish people on the path of the land of Plishtim, ki karovhu, that it was close, because it was close. A little bit unclear. Ki omar elokim, because God said, pen yinachem ha'am, b'rosam milchama v'shavu mitzrayim, that God said, lest the people will change their mind when they see war, and they'll return to Egypt. Before we get down to business, just as an aside, people talk about it a lot. This is one of the best examples of this in the Chumash. The word nechama, which we translate as consolation, that's the shoresh being used here. The way what nechama really means is to change one's perspective. That's really what it means. So it doesn't mean that people will be consoled when they see the war. It means that they'll have a different attitude and say, oh my gosh, let's go back to Egypt. So it's the greatest bracha a person can give another person when they're in mourning. It's not, I hope you just feel hunky-dory. That's not really what we're saying when we talk about nechama, but over time, the bracha is that a person should be able to shift their perspective on things. It's okay. But the pasuk's a little bit difficult to understand. And really, when you think about it, probably the most difficult phrase in the pasuk is that ki karovhu, that it was close. What are we saying about it being close? Let's see the Ramban. Ramban on pasuk Yitzai. Ki karovhu, v'noach lashuv ba'oso aderech l'mitzrayim. So the Ramban starts off by citing Rashi, and various Parsha say something similar to this, which is that God did not lead them on the path through the land of Plishtim because it was too close to Egypt, and if the going would get tough, it would be too easy for the Jewish people to throw in the towel and just go back to Egypt. That's Rashi's pshat in the pasuk. So therefore, God took them on a more circuitous route, so that if they were to become disenchanted with the mission, it actually would be difficult to head back to Egypt anyway, and therefore they'd be more inclined to keep on going. V'gam hudas Reb Evram, he says that's also the opinion of the Eben Ezra. Kitam v'lonocham v'lokim derech eretz plishtim ba'avur kikarofu. The meaning of the pasuk is that God didn't send them through the land of the Plishtim because it was close. V'inachamu, and they will change gears. V'yashuva mitzrayim miyad, they'll just turn back and go to Egypt. The aldati imhoya kitivrayim hoya kiyomar lukim mukdam. So the Ramban says a really interesting thing. The Ramban says it's a good pshat, but kiyomar lukim should be earlier in the pasuk. Kiyomar lukim is because God said, and it's explaining God's thought process. So it says in the pasuk, God didn't lead them to the land of the Plishtim because it was close. According to Rashi, because it was close is the reason why God didn't lead them to the land of the Plishtim. So it should have said, because God said, no, the land of Plishtim is close, and maybe the people will change their mind to go back to Egypt. But to put the thing about it being close before God's thought process, that seems to be not the intent here. Okay. Avol hanachon sheyomar v'lonocham elokim derech eretz Plishtim asher hu karov v'tov lanchosam baderech ahu. So the Ramban explains that kikarovu, that it was close, is not the reason God didn't take them down that path. It's a basic description of the path. That the most logical path on which to lead them would have been through the land of the Plishtim, because after all, it was the closest path. It was the most direct path. Why? Why did God not lead them through the land of the Plishtim? Kilmar Elokim, because God said, Because maybe the people will change their mind. Vitama milchama, what do we mean refer to the war? Sheyiyah lavor derech eretz plishtim, u'plishtim lo yitnu lavor b'shalom v'yashuvu l'Mitzrayim. So the reason God sent them on this more complicated path wasn't because of the other path's proximity to Egypt. It was because the other path was going to involve military combat relatively soon. If they would go through the land of the Plishtim wouldn't have the welcome carpet out for them. The Plishtim would fight with them. And the Jewish people might see that combat and turn tail. That might happen. Aval b'derech hamidbar lo yiru milchama yosef ba'artzam be'eretz sichon va'og malchi amori shenisunu lahem rechokim heim mitzrayim v'yisahi. If they go through the desert, what's the first war they're going to face? The first war they're going to face is the land of Sichon and Og. And that's land that actually God is going to give to them, to the Jewish people. And by the time they encounter Sichon and Og, so first of all, there's a certain reason for confidence. We're conquering the land that God is giving us. This is the land that we talk about in the Transjordan. But the other point is, by the time they encounter that battle, they're going to be long gone from Egypt. It's way too late to turn around at that point. So that's the pshat according to the Rambam. That the simpler path would involve military interaction much earlier, and that was the concern. Now, wait a second. That's not true. It's not true that the first war they had was with Sichon and Og. The first war they had was with the people of Amalek. But the Ramban says the battle with the people of Amalek was not reason to turn around to go to Egypt. Because the people weren't coming towards Amalek. Amalek sought out the Jewish people. They weren't going to the land of Amalek. Amalek resented the unique status and news of the Jewish people in the nation of God, so they wanted to do war with them. So the Jewish people are on the path. Amalek seek them out and attack them. If the Jewish people go to Egypt, Amalek will keep on following them that way. Amalek wants to fight with the Jewish people. Whereas if they would go to the land of the Plishtim wouldn't be looking to fight with the Jews, but if they would go to the land of the Plishtim wouldn't let them go through their land. So that's where the Jewish people, if they were going that way, might just shrug their shoulders and turn around and go back to Egypt. The other issue, of course, is that even if they somehow thought that turning around from Amalek would and going back to Egypt would make their lives easier, if it's a curved, circuitous path at this point, it'll be difficult to go back. Okay. The Lashon Rashi biro sam milchama go milchama saknani v'amaleki m'holchu b'derech yishara yichosvim. Man kishikifim derech mulkam amru nit narosh v'rashuv v'mitzrayim. Imolichim b'pshuta halachas kama v'cham. Okay, so whereas according to Rashi, the pshat is that the concern was that the Jewish people would have the interactions with Amalek, for example, and say, let's just turn around. But if it was a complicated path, it wouldn't be so easy to turn around. So that's an interesting distinction between the Ramban and Rashi and others. Okay, now let's go to the Orach Chaim. Orach Chaim on Pasuk Yitzah. Vayihi b'shalach. We've discussed this many times in many other psukim. There's a tradition that Vayihi is a language associated with sad news, disturbing news. And the Orach Chaim is bothered. What do you mean it's disturbing news? This is great news. The Jewish people have been freed from Egypt. Why does it say it in a disturbing way? Question number one. Question number two. If you were describing the story of the Exodus to somebody, some of you might have had that experience over the last 2 nights. If you were describing the story of the Exodus to someone, would you say Paro let the Jews go? Or would you say God brought the Jews out? If the point is that Paro let the Jews go, he was not very cooperative. I've got this no, I will not let them go ringing in my ears. But in any event, why does the Torah give Paro so much credit at the beginning of this parsha? It was when Paro sent the people out. What do you mean when Paro sent the people out? When God brought the people out. So it's either Orachaim on Yudzai. Vayi b'shalach tzarich ladas lama omar lashon tsar b'makom gila v'renan. This is a joyous announcement. The Jewish people leaving. Why do we use a language associated with distress? Ode. Lama kino ha'inyan b'paro v'lo ba'adon ha'masim. Why are we attributing the exodus from Egypt to Paro and not to the master of all creations? Ki hamotzi osanu mi'aretz Mitzrayim. God is the one who takes us out of Egypt. Achena kasuv yagid asiba shagarma kolatzar shenitzdaru Yisrael berdifas Paro. The pasuk is explaining to us the reason that caused all of the distress that the Jewish people had with Paro chasing them. The Omar Teda asibas hadavar b'tzad shlo hotzi Hashem es Yisrael ela lirtzono shel Paro. Interestingly, says the Or HaChaim, though obviously God made a great example of Paro, in the end of the day, God orchestrated events. The Jewish people only left once Paro said, I want you out. God, of course, could have taken the Jews out whenever he wanted, but for whatever reason, God chose this way. Kafoso, kept on pressuring Paro until Paro finally acquiesced that the Jewish people should go. V'amar lehem kumutzu. And so he told them to go. Mizechoshav machshavos lirdof achreyem kasher avoy bezos Hashem bozeh garam tsar liYisrael. Says the Or HaChaim, Paro was able to build the impression in his own mind that the Jewish people's departure was on his terms. Because in the end of the day, they didn't go until he told them to go. And therefore, once Paro got it in his head that the Jewish people were lost, or he wanted them, or whatever it is, that's why he had the seeming foolishness to chase them. Because he told himself, they're only gone because I told them to leave. If I wouldn't have told them to leave, they'd still be here. So now I can go and get them back. So that, says the Or HaChaim, is why it talks about Paro sending out the nation. It's not that the Torah thinks it's all about Paro. Of course, it's all about God. But it's reminding us that God orchestrated it, that Paro was the one to actually say go. And the reason why it's Vayihi, a language of distress, is because the travails and terrible, terrible fear the Jewish people felt when they see the water on one side and Paro on the other was because God orchestrated it that Paro should be the one to send them out. Now, of course, this all happened for a very specific reason. The reason this all happened was because God wanted to have the remarkable scene of the splitting of the sea. And in order to have the remarkable scene of the splitting of the sea, it would only work if Paro and his nation were willing participants in the drama. So the pasuk says, Or HaChaim, is it was a sad thing, or it caused distress for the Jewish people ultimately, that Paro sent out the nation. And that's sort of the introductory phrase to this story, which of course speaks to a lesson that I'm sure we've discussed many times before. Perhaps many of us even have discussed it in one way or another over Pesach already. But what a lesson that in the moment something seems terrible, absolutely terrible, and one can't even fathom why it would be that way. And if we hold on long enough, sometimes we gain clarity. And if we don't have clarity, we believe that God has clarity. So we discussed this morning the different ideas as to what the fact that the path through the Plishtim was close, how that impacts why God sent the Jewish people on another path. And we discussed this Or HaChaim regarding the distress caused from the events described at the beginning of the Parsha.